Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Temple City Council for Thursday, September the 3rd. If you'll please rise, Father Tom Chamberlain with Our Lady of Guadalupe Catholic Church will lead us in invocation, and Police Chief Gary Smith will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Father.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon our City Council as they gather here this afternoon. You will give them wisdom and guidance and right judgment and knowledge and courage to know your will and the matters that are brought before them, to make good decisions that will be for the benefit of our community, and give them the courage to carry out their decisions. Lord, we pray for all the people who come before the council today, that they may clearly present the matters and concerns that they have, so that these matters may truly be discussed and decided upon, that all may be done according to your will. And this we pray through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome everyone. We have a public appearance posted on the agenda for this evening, but as I understand that request has been withdrawn, and so we'll move on from there to public comments. Normally at this time, citizens who desire to address the council on any item may sign up to do so prior to the meeting, but we have no one signed up to speak this evening, so we'll continue on into the next portion of our agenda, which is the budget item in our agenda. Fairly lengthy this evening, to cover a lot of things for the presentation, the adoption of the budget, tax rate, and the tax rolls and the like. So we'll be a little bit, but and we have to be very, very specific as to how we do this. So I'm going to read items 4, 5, and 6. First of all, we'll take those items and then take the 7, 8, and 9 after that. Item 4 is a public hearing, and it's to conduct a public hearing regarding the city's budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st of 2009 and ending September 30th of 2010, and consider adopting a resolution. The first resolution being to ratify the property tax increase reflected in the budget. This budget will raise more total property taxes than last year's budget by $686,939, 4%, which is 4%. And of that amount, $456,769 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll this year. And item B is adopting the city's budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st of 2009 and ending September 30th of 2010, including the operating budget for 2009 to 2010, the capital improvement plan, and the fiscal and investment policies. And council, just an FYI, those two need to be handled separately, those two motions. Item 5 is a first and final reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance approving the tax roll and authorizing calculation of the amount of tax that can be determined for all real and personal property in the city for the tax year of 2009 to be considered on an emergency basis. Item 6 is a first and final reading and public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance levying taxes and setting a tax rate for the city for the tax year of 2009, making the appropriation for the regular operation of the city to be considered on an emergency basis. And again, there will be two separate motions there relative to the tax rate and the amount of the tax. So, David, do you want to start that off?
Yes, sir, Mayor. Thank you.
Tracy.
Mayor, Council, pleased to be here tonight and to present to you and to work you through your last item relative to the FY 2009-2010 budget, which is to conduct a public hearing and consider adoption of the proposed budget and the tax rate to support that budget. You have before you, as the Mayor just indicated, a list of items that need your consideration, and again, there are very strict processes and motions that need to be made associated with the tax code associated with that. What I would like to do is go through an abbreviated presentation, not quite that quick though, but a abbreviated presentation. I told Alan to be quick, so he was ready. Maybe. It didn't look like the first slide either. But we can use this one, I guess. But what I'll try to do is go through the presentation. We have, it is in essence the presentation that you have seen several times. I will not highlight, or what I will do is just highlight certain slides, and I will not go through each one of those, but I did want to give you just a quick overview. So if you would go to the first slide, and we'll see if that is in fact the first slide.
I think Alan needs to switch presentations. We both have the same cover sheet.
Oh. Just a moment. Well, while he's locating that, I'm just going to verbally kind of walk you through what I've got, what I was going to mention or highlight for you tonight. As council knows, we started this process with what I always call fence posts. The fence posts that stood out this year were maintaining our fiscal soundness, maintaining our tax rate, and then aligning our programs and services with revenue, which is really was highlighted this year, given our revenue situation being relatively flat as we went into, or as we're projecting the end of this year as we go into next year. Along those lines, again, when we received the Bell County Appraisal District tax roll revenues, they came in at about a 3.8% increase over FY09. While there was a slight increase in those property tax values, that is about half of the growth that we have seen over the previous decade or so. And of course, as council knows, our sales tax this year trend to date is a slight decline, just less than a percentage point or around a percentage point, for all practical purposes, flat on sales tax. And again, as council knows, property tax and sales tax make up a significant majority share of our general fund operating revenues. With that in mind, our tax base and tax rate, what I recommended to you in the preliminary budget was the current tax rate, which is 55.95 cents per $100 evaluation, with the addition of some money for fire bond debt service based on a GO bond that was approved by the voters. What that resulted in is a tax rate of 56.46, which is again slightly higher than the 55.95 to include the debt service for the fire bond issue. Our fund balance policy continues, as has historically been, balance our budget and incorporate those available fund balances under council policies. No utility adjustments are being proposed, save and except one utility area, that's solid waste. Council will recall we had a discussion associated with that item at a couple of your work sessions last month, or 2 months ago now, I guess, about making adjustments in our solid waste services or adjusting rates in lieu of those service adjustments. And the action items that you have before you in the budget now recommends a proposed increase of $1.25 per month in order to maintain our current service levels. Alan, if you'll flip next slide. Keep going. Public Works, I've already mentioned that one. You can go by that one. Go to the capital improvement slide if you would. Right there. Your 2010 recommendations are approximately $16.6 million in multi-year non-routine utility revenue bond funding. Again, highlighted some of the major projects associated with that, and then annual operating, and then you see some of the lists that are associated with that also. Now, if you skip about 4 or 5 slides to the water and wastewater fund, I just want to mention that real quickly. You see the overall budget there, about a 1.2% increase in revenues and expenses in the FY10 budget. Again, no rate changes being proposed for water and wastewater service. About $1 million in capital improvements included in the long-term replacement program, and about $300,000 of that fund equipment needs. And I think that was the last slide that I was going to highlight for you. I'm sorry, go to the summary slides for me if you would, Alan. Back up one. No, I'm sorry, you were right there. Your FY 2010 budget proposes approximately around $53 million in revenues for general fund. The difference in that is about $1 million decrease. So we will be at least we're forecasting right now that our revenues next year will be slightly less than they are this year. And as a result of that, we are also projecting expenditures and have made adjustments in the budget to reflect that also, so that we are going to be balanced. You go to the next slide, and that's my last slide, and I'll let Tracy highlight anything she'd like to highlight on hers. But our general fund revenues are down. Our general fund expenditures must also go down, and your budget that you have before you tonight represents those items. I believe we've got a temporary lull in the economy. If you want to call a lull, there is still some growth activity occurring, and I've been around the state, in fact, out of state recently, and we still have, relative to the rest of the country, our economy is in fairly good shape. Our long-term outlook is very favorable. I think the investments that the city has made, economic development has been made in infrastructure and in other areas of economic development will serve us well, both through this period and in the coming months. With that, I will stop and I'll let Tracy highlight a couple of things.
While Alan's pulling up the other presentation, I wanted to point out in your agenda item that in addition to the budget, the tax rate, tax roll, etc., also included in part of the annual budget is our fiscal and investment policies. Each year those are incorporated as part of the budget. This year there were no changes proposed to those investment policy or the fiscal and financial policies. Next slide, please. But just to highlight what those policies cover quickly. Next slide. Next slide. Next. The fiscal and budgetary policy is just a broad purpose of the fiscal and budgetary policy statement is to enable the city to achieve and maintain a long-term stable and positive financial condition. This policy sets out council's policy related to fund balance and how much we can incorporate part of the fund balance and balance in the budget, etc. And you can see the list of expenditure policies, asset management, etc. Next slide. Investment policy overview. Again, the objectives of the city's investment policy: safety, liquidity, and yield in that order. And this policy sets forth the authorized investments, reporting, and investment purchasing. So again, David had went over the CIP, capital improvement plan. The tax roll, the total taxable value is the $3.3 billion. That includes the city of Temple the freeze portion, and also the tax increment district, the amount that's related to the city of Temple. The tax rate, David went over, is 56.46. There's two components of that: the M&O rate and the INS rate. Compared to the effective rate, it's 2.45% above that. And the taxable value tax rate of 56.46, what would it cost a homeowner with a taxable value of $100,000 per month if there was no change in taxable value? It'd be 42 cents a month. If your home value increased, the average, which for the average of City of Temple this year was slightly less than 1%, it would be 84 cents a month. And tonight on the agenda is those three items as the mayor had read. I'd be happy to answer any questions related to any of these items or go into more detail if so desired.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard. Mr. Blackburn?
No, I'll just highlight our same comment. Be happy to go into any more detail. We did skip around on the slides a little bit, but we just tried to highlight some of the key provisions in there, and again, we'll go over them if you like.
Council comments, questions? Okay. We have public hearings on all of these items. Again, item 4 requires a public hearing, and that's relating to ratifying the property tax increase amounts, as I indicated earlier, and then also relative to adopting the budget, and then a first reading and public hearing to consider adopting the ordinance approving the tax rolls, and then the other item is to consider adopting an ordinance levying taxes and setting a tax rate for the fiscal year 2009. So at this time, I'll declare the public hearings open. You may come forward if you wish to speak on any of these 3 items relating to the current year's budget, tax rolls, and the tax rate. And please, if you don't mind, please state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments. And seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearings closed. And council, starting with item 4, at your pleasure, entertain a motion on item 4A relating to the increase in property taxes.
I move to ratify the property tax increase reflected in the budget.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. And item 4B is adopting the city's budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st of 2009 and ending September 30th of 2010, including the operating budget for 2009 and 10 capital improvement plan and the fiscal and investment policies. Entertain a motion on that item.
I move we adopt the city's budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2009 and ending September 30th, 2010 as presented.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. The next item is relating on item 5, and that's to consider adopting an ordinance approving the tax roll and authorizing the calculation of the amount of tax that can be determined for all real and personal property in the city for the tax year of 2009, considering that on an emergency basis. Entertain a motion.
I move that property taxes be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 56.46 cents per
That's the next
$100
item.
valuation.
Item 5 is the tax roll.
Okay. I move that we adopt an ordinance approving the tax roll and authorizing calculation of the amount of tax that can be determined for all real and personal property in the city for the tax year 2009 to be considered on an emergency basis.
We have that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. And now the item that requires you to specifically read the motion as it is printed on your agenda item there, please. If you wish, item 6 and the first listed under A.
I move that property taxes be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 56.46 cents per $100 valuation, which is effectively a 2.45% increase in the tax rate.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. And the second part of that motion is again required to be stated exactly as it's written. Entertain that motion.
I move that the ordinance setting the 2009-2010 tax rate for the city of Temple be adopted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Before we move on to the next item, let me once again express my appreciation on behalf of the council to David, to Tracy, your entire staff, and to all department heads and the staff of the city who've spent an extraordinary amount of time on this year's budget. This is kind of a culmination of a very, very long process. We've been working on this for 6 months. And we'll finish this, we'll take a little breather, and we'll probably start it again. Not too distant future, it'll seem like it anyway, so, but thanks to each and every one of you. I know this has been a very, very difficult budget year. The approach has been significantly different, and so the effort shows in the quality of the budget that we have this year. So thanks to each and every one of you for that effort. Item 7 is to consider adopting a resolution funding the rates for medical prescription insurance and dental insurance for employees and under age 65 retirees, as well as life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment insurance, and long-term disability insurance. Ms. Howard.
Thank you, Mayor. On July 16th, the trustees of the City of Temple Employee Benefits Trust agreed to purchase insurance contracts for fiscal year 09-10. We're coming forward to the council today to authorize the funding of this trust and the benefits that were awarded, in addition to the biweekly transfer of the contributions made by the city and the employees to the trust. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
All those are incorporated into the new budget. And
Yes, sir.
council questions from this house on the insurance line? If not, entertain a motion for the adoption of that resolution.
Motion to adopt a resolution funding the rates for medical prescription insurance and dental insurance for employees and under age 65 retirees, as well as life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment insurance, and long-term disability insurance.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 8 is to consider adopting a resolution setting the collection charges for residential solid waste services. Ms. Bernard?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This resolution is recommended by staff to increase residential rates by $1.25 a month. The rates will increase from the current $14.55 a month to $15.80 a month. This was a recommendation by staff during the budget process in lieu of any service adjustments to residential solid waste, or solid waste rates. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the rates or the revenues, and Bruce Butcher's here to ask or answer questions related to service.
And that relates to the slide that we saw that increases the rates on residential service by $1.25 per month.
Correct.
Any questions on that, Council? If not, entertain a motion to set the collection charges for residential solid waste services.
I move we adopt the resolution setting the collection charges for the residential solid waste services.
We have a motion and a second. Is there a second?
Second.
There being no discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 9 is to consider adopting a resolution amending the current utility system fees associated with the unauthorized use of water, new account fees, disconnect fees, residential deposits, meter accuracy test, and the return item charges to be effective October 1st of 2009.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. 2 weeks ago, we had our work session and we presented to Council some of the problems we were experiencing in the water department over the past year. We've seen a significant increase in the amount of unauthorized use of water. In FY 07, the Water Business Office identified and charged 29 customers. 2 years later, year to date this year, that number has reached 319. Tonight, as we discussed, we would recommending increasing those fees associated with unauthorized use of water, and in addition, increase residential deposits from $65 to $75. In our research and establishing the amounts that we're setting forth, we compared our current rates with peer cities and also looked at some of the cost of service of dealing with those problems. But our recommendation is to change the next schedule. There's several fees, and I have a schedule that shows the current fee, the proposed fee name, and then the proposed fee. they're all in a resolution attached to your agenda item also. Be happy to answer any questions related to those.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennard. Council, any questions on any of the fees or charges that are being proposed at this time? If not, entertain a motion to adopt the new fee structures effective October 1st, 2009 relating to utility system fees.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion, is there a second? Second. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lunan?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under this section, consent, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member, and it will be considered separately. This is item 10, A through like L tonight, and under a number of those, there are renewals of contracts for the coming year. And so there's quite a number of items expending roughly $1.4 million in funds that will be expended throughout the year for various and sundry supplies and services. And so this is a big agenda item for us tonight. But Council, are there any items that you wish to be removed from the consent agenda for individual consideration? And there are also some second readings and a first reading on a franchise agreement. If not, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is a second for approval of item 10, the consent agenda, A through L. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lunan?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. On the regular agenda, under ordinances, a first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from multifamily 1 district to general retail district on lots 3 and 4, block 56 of the Freeman Heights addition located at 1411 West Avenue H. And Mr. Dolan?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This is a request to look at opening a flower shop on an existing lot, and for the lending purposes of the bank, they asked for the adjacent lot, which is also owned by the applicant, to look at rezoning its property. The applicant initially submitted an application for general retail. The flower shop is also available in neighborhood service, and the applicant has signed the application to state that he would be in favor of the neighborhood service district. As you can see, this is on the other side of H, between 29th and 27th. The views to the north and to the east and to the west and the south show the hospital and existing attorney's office and the vacant tract there that would be developed. The property is shown as part of the auto urban retail area, and the thoroughfare plan is in conformance with the Avenue H being shown as a arterial, and there is a 6-inch sewer and a 14-inch water line that serves the site. As you can see, that the area is looked at to go from MF2 to the GR, but is recommended that we would go to the neighborhood service. It shows that the building height story for the neighborhood service is less in height than the GR. You have a 2.5-story maximum height with the same front, side, and rear yard setbacks. 7 notices were mailed to the property owners. 2 responded in agreement. At the meeting August 17th, Planning and Zoning Commission recommended 8-0 with Commissioner Pilkington absent to recommend approval of F0927 since it complies with the future land use and character plan, the thoroughfare plan, and the adequacy of public facilities. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has, and this is a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Council, any questions on this? If If not, this item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, is there a motion to rezone this property from multifamily 1 to neighborhood services?
I move we adopt an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from multifamily 1 district to neighborhood services on lots 3 and 4, Block 56, Freeman Heights Edition, located at 1411 West Avenue H.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion and comment? If not, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 12 is the first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance to amending the the City of Temple subdivision ordinance, section 3393, streets, to reference the residential subdivision entrance access design standards in the Design and Development Standards Manual. Mr. Dolan.
Again, Mayor and City Council, this is a public hearing for your first reading this evening. The Design Standard Advisory Board recommended approval for certain subdivision access standards, which is something different for the City of Temple, and essentially it marries up or reflects the same standards that was in your recently adopted Uniform Fire Code. And so, as you can see here, while it's in small print, that it's based on average daily trips that have been produced out of a single-family subdivision based on increments of 75. And so it would be one access point for a subdivision for 75 or fewer lots, and then as it increases, say, essentially between 76 to 150, 151 to 300, and 301 plus, the more access points are going to be required through a single-family neighborhood. If you could look at the exhibits for the figures 1, 2, 3, and 4, it shows that the certain types of points of ingress and egress for a subdivision to essentially not have the lots receiving access to the main entrance street as it comes into it, but essentially to be fronting on the interior roads, and you have the opportunity to look at either a local or a collector street providing access to the neighborhood, or the idea of coming through between two cul-de-sacs, as you can see in item number 4. The other thing that is more interest is looking at the use of the impact of traffic, is that if you would use the idea of a 41-foot approach, which is wider than a collector street road with the 36 feet of pavement, essentially these two types of diagrams for items 5 and 6 would count for 2 points of ingress or egress to the neighborhood. Depending upon the number of lots that are being planned for a single-family neighborhood, it could be essentially a wide approach of 41 feet, or it could be a median divided approach, and that's essentially recommended to be used through the Development Review Committee process and the Planning and Zoning Commission review for any single-family subdivisions. The bottom diagram, while it's more colorful, allows for a emergency vehicle access to be used as one of the points of ingress and egress due to the phasing. As the council is aware, many of the single-family subdivisions you review contain multiple phases of this development, and so that would be one process where it could be used to have emergency vehicle access to the neighborhood. On August 17th, the Commission recommended 8-0 in favor to the Council to approve this ordinance on your first reading, and the second reading would be September 17th. Be glad to answer any questions that the Council has.
Was this reviewed by DSAB, or
Yes, it was.
It was.
That's correct. Yes. And it was essentially just try to coincide with the approval of the fire code.
All right, great. Council, any other questions? This item requires a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council?
Motion to adopt an ordinance to amend the City of Temple subdivision ordinance section 33.93 on streets to reference the residential subdivision entrance access design standards in the Design and Development Standards Manual.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. There's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansack.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Item 13 is first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance amending Chapter 22 miscellaneous provisions and offenses of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Temple by deleting Section 22.2 barbed wire and electric fences, which have been replaced with amendments to the City of Temple zoning ordinance Section 13103. Who's going to present that one?
That's Tim.
Mr. Dolan?
That's Tim.
Present that.
Mayor, when the Section 13 of the fence and wall standards were approved earlier this year, this corrects an oversight from the miscellaneous ordinances, because when the fence and wall standards were approved, it also included the barbed wire and the electric fence in the fence and wall standards. So this just removes it from the miscellaneous standards.
Don't clean up item.
Clean it up.
All right, thank you. Questions from council or comments? This item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. If you wish to make a comment on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comment. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansack.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Next item, 14, first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance amending the tax increment financing reinvestment zone number 1 financing plan for fiscal year 2009 to recognize reimbursement for Gulf States Toyota and to reallocate project funding within the project plan and for the fiscal year 2010 to 2022 to increase zone maintenance funding. Ms. Burnett.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is essentially the financing plan amendment is like a budget. The financing plan is the budget for the reinvestment zone. On August 26, 2009, these items were presented to the reinvestment zone board and were approved to move forward to you. The amendments impact 7 line items. Several of them were just cleanup items for the fiscal year-end budget amendments associated with that, such as recognizing revenue from Gulf States Toyota for improvements on the rail park, also appropriating funding for a letter of map revisions in Pepper Creek, lighting, appropriating funds for lighting on Windland Road, the street lights and other costs associated with those lights, airport park lighting, Outer Loop Phase 2. There were several change orders related to that project. The Bios Science Park, it was also to clean up and funding associated with that construction project. And then adding $100,000 to bring it to a total of $175,000 for maintenance mowing of zone right-of-ways. And that funding is being recommended to allocate through year 2022. With these amendments, they were all funded with project savings from the bond projects or bond contingencies, with the exception of one that added $2,350 from fund balance. And the zone maintenance that added the $100,000 came from general public improvements through the end of the life of the zone. I'll be happy to answer any questions related to these amendments. Thank you.
Council, questions relative to the changes and amendments? If not, again, this item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward, state your name and address for the record prior to making your comment. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, motion on item 14.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on item 14 for the changes to the tax increment financing reinvestment zone number 1 financing plan. There's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansack.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. And item 15 is consider adopting resolution appointing 1 member to the Airport Advisory Board to fill an unexpired RZ number 1 position through September 1st of 2012, and 1 member to fill an unexpired term from Temple resident position through September 1st of 2010. The reinvestment zone number 1 has recommended Bob Browder from the reinvestment zone board to be appointed as a member of the airport advisory board from the reinvestment zone. And we have a citizen, Mr. Rayford Brown, who is a Temple resident, to be considered for the position of Temple resident position through September 1st of 2010. So Mr. Bob Browder for the reinvestment zone and Rayford Brown for the City of Temple position. Are there any other recommendations or from the council? If not, I entertain a motion for those 2 appointments to the reinvestment, or to the airport board, airport advisory board.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the appointment of Mr. Brown and Mr. Crowder to the airport advisory board. There's no further discussion. Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our agenda for this evening. Thank you very much for your attendance and your participation. And again, thank you, staff, for a great job on the budget this year. Thank you for your work. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.